Hi guys, how are you doing? Thank you so much for being here today. I know we are between, your next lunch or happy hour, right? But thanks for being here with us. So maybe let's start with the first introduction, right? So Chakan, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hi, Chakan. I'm with Verifone today, but I spent the last 20 years at Visa working on product innovation, product risk. Some of the big projects I've worked on the US migration from MaxDrive to EMV, introduction of token with Apple Pay, as well as soft POS and introduction of cost acceptance. So with Verifone, I continue that industry transformation by building out a biometric solution to enable biometric-initiated transactions.
Thank you. You next, Suhail.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Suhail, Jalil. Hopefully, you can all hear me. I can't see anyone here, but I think I can hear you all. I've been at Qualcomm for a while now. I'll not age myself, but I've essentially grown with the company, working on all things multimedia. So we started with speech and voice recognition, then moved on to images and then video processing. I've been focused mostly on implementing these solutions with compute in mind and security in mind. And they say overnight successes take decades in the making, and I think it's going to be something similar with payment and biometrics. I'm sure we can learn from kind of the adoption curves and what we have learned on smartphones with biometric adoption. So happy to be here and talking to all of you.
Thank you, Suhail. And last but not least, my name is Vu, and I'm at Qualcomm for over 3 years, and I'm leading the biometrics business at Qualcomm. And before Qualcomm, I worked for a bank in Asia, managing the credit card business. So last year, I was very, very lucky to have a chance to have a speakership at PCI Asia events in Hanoi about biometrics. And this year, I'm even more grateful to have two of my, favorite people on earth to join with me today to talk about biometrics. Okay. So before we touch on like serious topic, let's break the ice. Tell me and tell everyone here a fun or memorable experience you have with biometrics in your life, in your work.
Sure.
Okay.
So I was part of a team that tested a biometric solution before it was launched in the marketplace. So we were trying all sorts of attack. We literally arrived with rubber mask, like Mission Impossible, with a lot of the ladies in that group was doing like full face makeup, trying to fool the biometric solution. So it was the most fun afternoon I've ever spent in my entire, working life. And I'm happy to report that, the solution remains secure.
Okay. Sounds fun. How about Suhail? Any fun memory with biometrics?
Yeah, so mine is actually more of a doozy. So, I travel a lot, and I've been using global entry. And I remember the first time I started using it, it was such a great user experience that I ended up looking for a security guy to make sure I actually did it right. So I actually ended up spending more time verifying that. But I think it's a great reminder of just how important that user experience and friction component is. So
I see. So seem like biometrics payment, right, has become a thing, right, in our daily life. And I see in the market, right, early adoption from China or major player like JP Morgan Chase or Amazon are investing heavily on it. But from your experience, do you believe biometrics payment will be a next big thing in payment? And if so, what are the key benefits for the ecosystem for it? So, Chakan?
Sure. So the way we see it is that biometric transactions is a natural evolution of transactions and payments. So we're in the industry, we're seeing it go from cards to contactless payment by your phone and watches. And biometrics is just the next natural step. And I'm also going to take this opportunity to actually make a distinction. So what we're talking about is biometric-initiated transaction, meaning that you no longer need your card, you no longer need your watch or your phone to initiate the end-to-end transaction versus biometric authentication, which is sort of like replacing your CDCVM or replacing your signature and PIN. So what we're talking about is biometric-initiated transaction. In terms of key benefits, right, biometrics is just the most natural way of accessing someone's digital identity. So if you think about merchants today, they're all going omni-channel. Unfortunately, when a consumer step into the physical store, the merchant suddenly becomes blind. They have no idea who I am, that I'm their best customers or whatnot. And I think biometrics solves this gap. It covers this gap, allowing a merchant in an omni-channel world to be able to tie my digital online identity with the identity when I step into a physical store.
Okay, very nice. How about you, Suhail?
Yeah, so I think just kind of leveraging off of what we have seen on smartphones, right? So for I think some of us who remember, people would have cameras before smartphone cameras, and I think cameras and smartphones really took off more as a convenience, and they were always there with you when the screen or the scene was available. And similarly, I see with biometrics, your face or your palm is always with you, right? So I do see a trend in terms of kind of always being there for you for the user. I think it's going to be much more convenient for the user. I think from the bank side, there is something to be said about kind of that proof of liveliness and the fact that biometrics will offer these banks and payment providers a lot better level of fraud detection. Probably they'll do much better on compliance. And so I think it's not a matter of if, but when we will see a lot more of the transactions shift to biometrics. So happy to get in the details of that.
I see. And for me personally, I'm a very clumsy guy. I forgot my phone, my wallet. All the time, I even forgot my passport in Changi Airport one time, right? So I just wish if I don't need to bring anything with me. And then I think biometric can resolve that pain point from the consumer
Convenience.
side. Yes. So it seems very aligned about, right, the benefits of biometrics, but I'm pretty sure there are a lot of challenge, barrier to actually build, scale, and grow the solution. So from business standpoint, especially from merchant adoption or user behavior, what are some of the challenges and what is a high-level solution you can think of?
Sure. I think there are three key challenges. The first being security, second being privacy, and third one being perception.
Okay.
So security, obviously, we're here at the PCI North America community meeting. I think this is where PCI actually can play a role in terms of establishing the standards for biometric data. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking about data that initiates a transaction, right? So similar to card data that we have today. Unfortunately, DSS only covers card data, and I think extending that, covering any data that initiates transaction would be a very, very good step, so security. Number two, privacy, right? So for folks, you guys probably have heard of GDPR in Europe.
Yeah.
There's equivalent regulations around the world. But ultimately, so I think the key solutions is that whoever's building the solutions like Verifone, we are intimately familiar with the requirements and we are building the solutions to meet the privacy regulations, right? So things like consumer consent, right? The T's and C's, privacy by design, these are the things that would resolve a lot of the regulatory concerns of deployments of merchants and whoever's deploying the solutions. Lastly, perception. So I think, especially in the world today, there's a lot of perception tying biometrics to criminal activities like with fingerprint. But the good news there is that over the years, there's a lot of solutions that are biometric based, from Apple Face ID to using biometrics to unlock your computer, to if anyone is travel or flew into Fort Worth, probably use clear TSA.
Yeah.
So I think the perception has changed in the industry, in the world, with regards to biometrics. And I think the younger generation, the digital natives, like the millennials, Gen X, Gen Alphas, they're posting their pictures on Instagram, on Snapchat. I think that there is a different perception of the security or value of biometric-related data, or at least they're really more comfortable with using their information that way. So I think those are the three high-level solutions that will address the concerns of security, privacy, and perception.
Yeah, I really like your third point about perception, and in my mind, we can use another word, which is trust, right? how you build the trust for consumer to willing to give the biometrics to the
Correct.
provider, let's say a bank or Verifone, right, or a merchant, to use that, right? Because at the end of the day, we have only one face and two hands. We could not lose, the credential on that. So building trust is very important for consumer.
Yeah.
So from technology standpoint, what are the challenges to have, like camera, device, sensor, security? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, so there are a couple of challenges. So I'll try to just go, how much time do we have, Wu?
You have time.
Okay, this will take a while. I think so. Really, it starts with the camera, right? So when we think about camera tuning, say for selfies, you want to make sure blemishes are gone, your image is kind of perfect for that call. But if you think about tuning the camera for machine readability, then the tuning requirements are almost orthogonal, right? So you actually want to preserve all the artifacts of your face or palm because that's biometrically significant data. So it's very important to invest in camera tuning specifically for biometrics. And then I think when I think through security, and I think we are not mentioning security nearly enough as we need to in this discussion because all it takes is one bad event, I think, for brands to deviate from their norm, right? So I think about security really in three parts. So first, we have to think about what are the assets that we need to protect. I think far too long people talk about the raw frame or the templates, or you think about the attack surface on how you minimize that. So it's important as a community we all kind of agree on what are the assets to protect. And then the second aspect of security is you really need to think about where do we need to protect these? So do we need to protect them in the cloud? Do we need to protect them when they're stored? Do we need to protect them when they're in motion or during execution? And that's really a trick question, right? Because the right and the only answer is you need to protect them in all phases of that journey. And then really kind of the last aspect of security, which is we really need to think about what attack vectors do we need to protect them from, right? So if I think about man-in-the-middle attack or replay attacks or spoof attacks, I think it's very important that our community develops kind of the penetration testing and kind of the standards around ensuring we're able to actually catch these elements, right? So like today, for example, I see solutions where the frame data is being handled above the HLOS, so outside a trusted execution environment. I really think those are, those are very risky to manage biometrically significant frame data outside a trusted environment. So I think it's important to think through that part. I would say the last part, again, from a user experience, and I think Chakan and Wu talked about this, is you really want to think about how to break the problem between what you do on the cloud and what you do at the edge with latency and user experience in mind. So you kind of want to make sure the processing you do on the edge happens without any input from the server side so that you can have kind of lowest latency end-to-end. I think a lot of user experience work has been done on how people think about biometrics with friction versus non-friction. And that, I would say that end-to-end latency has to be 1.5 seconds end-to-end or less than that, right? So that's actually a very high bar. And so you really have to kind of revisit how as a community we look at, what's the work on the cloud and what's the work on the edge. So when I think about things like liveness, typically when we want to make sure there's a proof of human, typically we will have companies do liveness check with a single RGB frame on the cloud. But if you're doing that on the edge, you can use multiple frames, you can use multiple modalities of camera input, so you can use RGB, NIR.
Yeah.
I promised Wu I won't talk too much about abbreviations.
But I think that's one point I want to highlight for the audience here is that the possibility of bringing like the whole data set or the matching model on the device so that nothing will leave the device. I think that can provide better, safer, better latency, right? More privacy for the consumer and break the barrier that they have in mind.
That's right.
So we talk a lot about framework, security, perception, privacy, right? It seems to me that we need a standard,
Yes.
how to frame everything in an organized way. So in your mind, do you see the need of standardization for the growth of biometrics payment? And if yes, what exactly you want to standardize?
Well, I can't say no, right? This is the PCI
Yes, of course.
North America conference. Well, but all jokes aside, yes, we talked about the security standard, PCI and whatnot. But besides security, there's also functional standards because one of the challenge of solution is that they're all isolated and closed loop. So functional standards would allow interoperability between solutions. So obviously I'm representing Verifone, but we're not the only, for example, manufacturer of terminals and solutions today in the world. So in order to create interoperable standards for biometrics that will enable like my enrollment to work in Singapore, Brazil, or Mexico, that is where standards come in place in terms of functional standards. Just like in the payment industry today, everyone talks ISO 8583. As long as you talk ISO 8583, you're able to communicate and transact. So that is the kind of standards. It might be ISO, it might be ANSI, it might be FIDO, or EMV, right? But essentially what we need is a set of standards that would promote and allow interoperability between solutions in the industry.
Let's say how Verifone device, Zebra device, Ingenico device,
Correct.
Walmart, Starbucks, and
Correct.
any merchant can work well together.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the only way for the solution to be adopted,
I see.
both in the US and on the global
Okay.
point of view.
So Suhail, in just 1 minute, how you answer that question?
Yeah, so I look at standards really again standing on the shoulder of giants, right? So when we think about image video standards, typically the decoders get specified, not the encoder, right? So what I think we need to do again on standardization is we need to think about the assets to protect and the attacks to protect from. I think we should work as an industry to standardize those. I think we should not try to standardize how to protect it. Similar in my mind, that's more like an encoder task. And then the other thing I think we want to set is some minimum bar of hardware that would meet kind of a payment module for biometrics, right? This is important because there is this GIJO principle, junk in, junk out, right? And so you really want to make sure that the cameras and kind of the lighting module is set up for the best user experience possible.
I see. I like the idea of like minimum bar for everything, right? So that we just go better from that. Okay. So there is one keyword that I have heard like for the whole section today, which is collaboration, right? So from the ecosystem collaboration standpoint, what is the message you guys want to send to the audience here? Like how we should work together to ensure to scale and grow biometrics in a secure and sustainable way?
Sure. So industry collaboration, like you mentioned, but ultimately I think also value creation, right? So a solution needs to bring with it intrinsic value, value for the consumer. Why would the consumer adopt a biometric solution? Value for a merchant in terms of deploying acceptance terminal that accepts biometric. Value for the networks, value for the financial institutions. So everyone has a role to play in the equation in terms of creating a solution that adds value to the overall ecosystem versus, being detrimental to it.
I see. How about you, Suhail?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that was said. I would say maybe one more thing to add is, again, I think as we see more value get shifted to biometric transactions, I think it's very important that as an industry, we all work together to make sure that things are secure, right? Because I think security is not like an average, right? So I think the proof point is just one event, right? And so I think you'll see a lot of people be reluctant to adopt biometrics, and I think that's maybe part of the motivation. So as a community, it's this group's responsibility to address that.
Yeah.
So super excited to be part of this.
So that's also the message we want to send to all of you, right? We believe biometrics could be the big things coming in the payment world, but we need support from all of you, PCI, EMV, Visa, MasterCard, network, bank, merchant, hardware provider, software provider, security lab, right? Work on together. And of course, merchant and user too, to scale and grow it in a secure and sustainable way. So we hope that 20 minutes with three handsome gentlemen on the stage have given you some insightful and something useful for biometrics payment. Thank you so much for your time. Yes.
Thank you all.